Being a parent is such an honorable, frustrating, beautiful, crazy journey, especially in the summer. For 11 years, I worked for Kaiser Permanente's Educational Theater. For 5 of those years, I worked for the conflict management program that taught kids how to stop and breathe when they're in a conflict. All of this to avoid violence and relentless rage. Boy, did I underestimate how hard it actually is to do this. Little did I know back then that my time would come to put this theory to the test. A golden time would emerge when I was going to question everything that I thought I was. My time as a parent. Because no one will give you more opportunities to stop and breathe before you act and manage your anger than a child who is 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I stopped there because my kids are 4 and 6. One day, about a year ago, when my kids were 3 and 5, I decided to brave them all and go shopping for summer clothes with them. The minute my kids saw the huge racks of clothes, it was over. They started to run from rack to rack, hiding from each other, and when they realized I was searching for them too, they began to hide from me. Before I knew it, I was in an episode of Curious George. They undressed a mannequin nearby, pointed and laughed at her boobs, broke off one of her arms, and there I am holding this mannequin's arm, reasoning with my 5-year-old, and just as I thought it couldn't get worse, I turn around and I see my 3-year-old with his pants down and his private God-given member out in full pee flow on the beautiful carpeted floor of Macy's Burbank. The aggressive demeanor of my boys surprises me. The war sounds, the hunting, that need to climb and test their survivability, and then they'll do something completely opposite and surprise me again. My son said about a coyote we spotted the other day, "I hope he gets home safe." A big change from a previous die, bug, die moments he'd have, when he was younger. I have to constantly assert myself with them as well. You wouldn't let any other man in your life treat you like this, would you? My own super nanny friend asked me once. To scream at you, "Mom, I'm done, wipe my butt." I have to repeatedly ask these little men to ask me in a kinder, gentler way, "Mom, can you please come and wipe my butt?" Don't let it slide. I have found this to be very true. Let it slide and they're going to end up in jail. So I'm doing the hell out of stopping and breathing, but they're not. Should I have been spanking all along like my forefathers did? Am I not being tough enough on these boys? Maybe my teachings will appear magically in them one day, like when they're 27. I don't know when exactly I realized this, but my husband and I are raising 2 children who will walk in the world as men. My husband is a wonderful role model. As for myself, I have to think about the kind of man that I want walking around the world and how my teachings and those teachings from the men I know will flow through me as their mother. And as a wife, daughter, granddaughter, sister, I've noticed a few recurring themes in the sweet souls of some of the most important men in my life. Their stifled emotions, the pressure on them to be a man about it, como hombre, withstand it all like a man would. The men in my family are treasures to me. My grandfather, may he rest in peace, his name was Rubén Umaña. That's my father's name and my brother's name as well. He was a man of tradition with a hard demeanor. He softened up quite a bit when his youngest son, my father, had 4 daughters and a boy. My grandparents lived with us for many years, so we were very close to both of them. My abuelito was kind and loving to us. He'd always ask me to punch his stomach as hard as I could, even into his late 70s. His distended stomach seemed to be made of steel. He'd watch us do our homework, and without fail, he'd come to correct us in the way that we held our pencils, saying our hands looked so ugly, clutching the pencil as we did, that we had to write with elegance. He'd teach us 3 or 4 words that meant the same thing, always increasing our vocabulary. He'd speak of Guatemala's history and would even cry when he was really emotional about a topic. It always seemed to me so out of place when he'd cry in certain places during the telling of a story. When Ubico was president of Guatemala, it was quite a time. There was no crime, no stealing. You could leave your door open at night. And then he'd cry. Mija, I'm glad you did good on your test. It's important to read and use good vocabulary, because when you know words. And he'd cry. And stories about President Clinton would always get him. El Presidente Clinton! Tears. And the thing is that my father had told us so many stories about how hard my grandfather was with him, how he didn't like to hang out with him because all he did was correct him, kneeling him down on rice for hours at a time when he had stolen away to visit my mom one night, tying him up next to a loud school bell until he couldn't get the ringing out of his ears, whipping him with his belt. And now here was my abuelito crying in front of me on every other word. Did my grandfather cry because he had been hardened for so long that now there was no other choice but to sob? And nevertheless, my father adored his father. My father, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. He told us that he consciously made the decision to be friends with his children. He wanted to make sure that we always had a way in with him to share our worries and ask questions about anything. My father wasn't exactly the best at initiating these conversations, but he was open. He was all mielita, pure honey, which led to other issues, but that's another story. My father continues to be affectionate and loving, a far cry from how he and his brothers were with his own dad. I remember much later when my grandpa was getting older that my uncles and my father would jokingly hug him tight and force a kiss on his cheek. Everybody in the room would be laughing and in shock of these 4 grown men kissing each other on the cheek at the dinner table of some Chinese restaurant downtown. We'd all be laughing, but deep down inside, we were overjoyed and in awe of those rare and special moments. Last year, I had a life-changing experience with my dear father as he overcame a very tumultuous time of anxiety and depression. My sister and I were able to be in therapy with him with his permission. I was grateful that my father trusted us so much to see him in such a humbling state. He was at his lowest. I remember a while back, I asked my father about how he was feeling about a loss that he had experienced. He had lost a business and a very special relationship in the span of about 2 years. I'm fine. I put that away in a box and locked it up and put it away for good. During this difficult time with my father, I learned that our pains and our wounds have to be reckoned with because they will surface and no amount of withstanding it like a man will make it go away. So as a boy, when your dad has been handling it como hombre and doesn't reveal a little of his own suffering and show you how he gets through it, how do you grow up to do that yourself? God knows my kids will see me puffy-eyed and on the phone with a sister or a friend, chanting on a mountaintop and eating cake in the corner many a time, now and in the future. Because you're not always the hero in the story as a parent. You can be the down-and-out guy and the bad guy and the drunk guy, too. So I keep talking to my boys and explain all the whys instead of the pow pow, the spanking that I feel that bypasses emotions and conversations. I set boundaries and I hope that they'll last for a week. It's hard. I skip the mindful parenting sometimes and threaten and scream. Just recently, I asked my own 6-year-old son if he'd like to go sleep outside if he's so determined to do what he wants. He screams out to me, "Why do you get to do what you want?" I get to drink wine at any time of the day and eat chocolate bread pudding before bed because I didn't tell my time, homie. To judge is to say, if I were you, in the totality of your circumstances, I'd do better than you, as Eric Eisenstein describes it. I don't know what it is to have lived in my grandfather's shoes, or in his time, or my father's. I know that I'm so grateful for their love and the life lessons that they've taught me. Today, as a mother, my mission is to instill compassion in my boys and a connection with their own inner life so that they don't have to carry a false story of what it means to be a man. Yesterday, we had a little 1-year-old girl spend the day with us. All of a sudden, boys were running to get napkins and wipe tears, watching the words that came out of their mouths, holding this little girl's hands carefully, guiding her down the steps. Who knows? Maybe a quick fix would be to add a sister. We'll see. We'll see. Thank you.